Sarah Johnson's hands froze over the keyboard as footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. She wasn't supposed to be here, not at this desk, not looking at this screen. The cleaning cart beside her suddenly felt like evidence of a crime she hadn't committed yet. "What the hell are you doing?" The voice cut through the silence like a blade. Sarah spun around to face Michael Sterling himself, standing in the doorway of his corner office at 2:30 in the morning. His dark hair was disheveled, his white shirt wrinkled and sleeves rolled up. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I was cleaning your office, Mr. Sterling." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. "The computer screen was on, and I noticed something." Mike stepped closer, his gray eyes narrowing. "You noticed something? On my computer?" The disbelief in his tone made Sarah's cheeks burn. "Do you have any idea what you're looking at?" Sarah glanced back at the monitor displaying lines of code that had been running in an endless error loop. For the past 3 months, she'd been cleaning this office every night, watching Mike work until dawn on this same problem. Tonight, the screen had been left open, and the pattern had jumped out at her immediately. "It's a recursive function that's calling itself incorrectly," she said quietly. "Line 847 has a missing parameter in the callback function. That's why your energy efficiency algorithm keeps crashing." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Mike stared at her as if she'd spoken in ancient Greek. Then he moved to the computer, scanning the code she'd pointed out. 50 of the best programmers in the world have been working on this for months," he said slowly. "MIT graduates, Stanford PhDs, people with decades of experience. And you're telling me you spotted the error while dusting my desk?" Sarah lifted her chin despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm telling you what I see." Mike's fingers flew over the keyboard, implementing the fix she'd suggested. The program compiled without errors. He ran it again and again. Each time, the algorithm executed flawlessly, processing energy distribution calculations that had been failing for months. "This is impossible." Mike turned to face her fully, and Sarah could see the exhaustion and frustration that had been driving him. "Who are you really?" "I'm nobody special," Sarah said, reaching for her cleaning supplies. "Just someone who pays attention. Nobody special doesn't solve problems that have stumped teams of experts." Mike blocked her path to the door. "What's your background? Where did you study?" Heat flashed through Sarah's chest. The question she'd been dreading, the reminder of everything she couldn't afford, couldn't access, couldn't become. "I didn't study anywhere that matters. I clean offices for a living." "That's not what I'm asking." "Yes, it is." Sarah met his gaze directly. "You want to know how someone like me could possibly understand something like that? You want my credentials, my pedigree, my proof that I deserve to be in the same room as your precious algorithm." Mike's expression shifted, something like surprise replacing the suspicion. "I want to understand how you solved in 60 seconds what my entire R&D department couldn't solve in 3 months. Because I wasn't trying to prove how smart I am," Sarah shot back. "I wasn't overthinking it or showing off my knowledge of advanced theoretical frameworks. I just looked at what was broken and fixed it." The words hung between them in the dim office. Outside, Seattle's skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, Sarah felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. This conversation could go in directions that terrified her. Mike sat down heavily in his leather chair, running both hands through his hair. "Do you have any idea what this algorithm controls?" Sarah shook her head. "It's the core of a renewable energy distribution system that could reduce global carbon emissions by 30%. The Department of Energy has been waiting for us to deliver a working prototype for 6 months. My board is breathing down my neck, and our competitors are getting closer to a similar breakthrough every day." He looked up at her again, and Sarah saw something she hadn't expected: vulnerability. "I've been living in this office, surviving on coffee and determination, because I know this technology could change everything. And tonight, a night janitor walks in and solves the problem that's been destroying my life." Sarah felt the weight of what she'd done settling on her shoulders. "I should go. My shift ends in 2 hours, and I still have 4 floors to clean." "Wait." Mike stood up. "What's your name?" "Sarah Johnson." "Sarah Johnson." He repeated it like he was testing how it sounded. "How long have you been working here?" 8 months. "And before that?" Sarah hesitated. The truth was complicated, painful, and none of his business. "Before that, I did what I had to do to survive." Mike studied her face in the blue glow of the computer monitors. "I'm going to make you an offer, Sarah Johnson, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." I don't want charity. This isn't charity. This is business. Mike's voice took on the edge that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. I need someone who can think differently, who can see solutions that others miss. Someone who isn't trapped by conventional wisdom or academic groupthink. Sarah felt her heart racing. What are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow morning, I'm going to call a meeting with my executive team and tell them that our new special consultant just solved the problem that's been eating this company alive. And that consultant is you. The Sterling Technologies conference room had hosted billion-dollar mergers and world-changing product launches, but Sarah doubted it had ever seen anything quite like this. She sat at the massive mahogany table, still wearing her cleaning uniform, while 12 executives in $1,000 suits stared at her like she was a fascinating specimen under a microscope. Mike stood at the head of the table, his presentation clicker in hand. Behind him, the wall-mounted screen displayed the energy algorithm running smoothly, processing calculations that had been impossible just 12 hours ago. The fix was implemented at 3 a.m., Mike announced to the room. The algorithm is now functioning at 112% of projected efficiency. We can deliver the prototype to the Department of Energy ahead of schedule. Richard Hartwell, the chief technology officer, leaned forward in his chair. And you're telling us this breakthrough came from a janitor? Sarah felt every gaze in the room shift to her. The weight of their skepticism was almost tangible. Ms. Johnson identified the error that our entire development team missed, Mike said evenly. She solved in minutes what we couldn't solve in months. That's impossible, said Jennifer Walsh, head of human resources. Our team includes graduates from the top computer science programs in the country. They have decades of combined experience. Mike's jaw tightened. The algorithm is running. The problem is solved. Those are facts. Robert Sterling, Mike's uncle and the company's chief financial officer, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. Michael, surely you understand the optics here. We can't simply promote cleaning staff to consultant positions without proper vetting, background checks, educational verification. I don't need educational verification to recognize results, Mike replied. Sarah had heard enough. She stood up, her chair scraping against the polished floor. Mr. Sterling, thank you for the opportunity, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never asked for a promotion or a consultant position. I was doing my job, nothing more. Sit down, Mike said quietly, but his tone carried absolute authority. We're not finished. Sarah remained standing. Yes, we are. I can see what everyone in this room is thinking. You believe this is some kind of publicity stunt or charity case. You think I'm not qualified to be here, and honestly, you're probably right. You solved a problem that stumped 50 experts, Mike countered. One time. That doesn't make me qualified to work alongside people with advanced degrees and years of experience. Sarah looked around the table at the faces watching her. I have a high school diploma and a library card. That's the extent of my technical education. The admission sent a ripple of whispers around the room. Then how did you recognize the error? Asked Dr. Patricia Chun, the head of research and development. Sarah had been dreading this question. The truth was complicated, involving years of teaching herself programming languages during break times at various jobs, staying up late in public libraries, watching online lectures on borrowed laptops. It was a patchwork education that couldn't be summarized on a resume. I read a lot, she said simply. Robert Sterling scoffed. You read a lot. That's your explanation for solving a problem that required advanced knowledge of renewable energy systems and complex algorithmic structures. Uncle Robert, Mike warned. No, Michael. This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision-making that concerns the board. You can't run a multi-billion-dollar company based on midnight hunches and feel-good stories. Sarah felt her temper flaring. You're right, Mr. Sterling. I don't belong here. I don't have the right background or the right credentials. But I fixed your problem, and that's worth something, even if my method doesn't fit your corporate playbook. She turned toward the door, but Mike's voice stopped her. What would it take? Sarah turned back. What? What would it take for you to accept a consulting position with Sterling Technologies? Mike's question caught everyone in the room off guard, including Sarah. Mike, you can't be serious, Jennifer Walsh interjected. I'm completely serious. Ms. Johnson demonstrated an ability that we need. I want to know what it would take to secure that ability for this company. Sarah stared at him, trying to understand his motivation. There was something in his expression that went beyond professional interest, an intensity that made her uncomfortable. I have conditions, she said slowly. Name them. First, I work on a project-by-project basis. No long-term contracts, no corporate politics. If I solve a problem, I get paid. If I can't, you don't owe me anything. Mike nodded. Agreed. Second, I maintain my current schedule. I work nights and I work alone. No team meetings, no progress reports, no hand-holding. That's highly irregular, Dr. Chin protested. Those are my terms, Sarah said firmly. Agreed, Mike said again, ignoring the looks from his executives. Third, and this is non-negotiable, I want a written guarantee that my sister's medical school scholarship remains protected regardless of what happens with this arrangement. If this goes badly, she doesn't pay the price. Something flickered in Mike's eyes at the mention of her sister. Done. Sarah felt like she was stepping off a cliff, but the alternative was returning to minimum wage jobs and constant financial anxiety. Then I accept. The room erupted in murmurs of disapproval and disbelief. Robert Sterling stood up abruptly. Michael, I hope you know what you're doing. The board will hear about this. The board will hear about results, Mike replied coolly. Ms. Johnson just solved our biggest technical challenge. I'd say that's worth taking a risk. As the executives filed out of the conference room, Sarah remained seated, suddenly exhausted. Mike approached her, his expression unreadable. You handled that well, he said. Did I? Because it felt like I just painted a target on my back. Welcome to corporate consulting. Targets come with the territory. Mike sat down across from her. There's something I need to ask you, Sarah Johnson. The way he said her name made her skin prickle with warning. What's your father's name? The question hit her like a physical blow. Why would you ask me that? Just curious about your background. Sarah stood up quickly. My background is irrelevant. You hired me to solve problems, not to satisfy your curiosity about my family history. She headed for the door, but Mike's next words stopped her cold. Your father was Nathan Johnson, wasn't he? Sarah's new workspace was a glass-walled office on the 32nd floor, complete with a view of Elliott Bay and enough technology to run a small country. The nameplate on her door read S. Johnson, Special Consultant, which felt like a joke every time she saw it. 3 weeks into her new position, she was discovering that solving technical problems was the easy part. Navigating the social minefield of Sterling Technologies was proving far more challenging. Did you hear about the new hire? The voice carried clearly through the thin walls as Sarah worked late on her current project. Apparently, Sterling picked her up from the cleaning crew. Talk about affirmative action gone wrong. Sarah's fingers paused over her keyboard. She'd grown accustomed to the whispers, the sideways glances, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. But hearing it spoken so casually still stung. I heard she solved some coding problem and now thinks she's the next Steve Jobs, another voice added. My bet is she crashes and burns within a month. $10 says she's sleeping with the boss. How else does a janitor end up with a corner office? Sarah saved her work and gathered her things. The renewable energy distribution system she'd been optimizing could wait until tomorrow. Right now, she needed air that wasn't poisoned with corporate gossip. She was waiting for the elevator when Mike appeared beside her, holding a coffee cup and looking like he'd been working for 20 hours straight. Leaving early tonight, he asked. It's past midnight, Sarah replied. Most people would call this late. Most people don't solve impossible problems for a living. The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside together. How's the new project coming? The algorithm is running 30% more efficiently than your original projections. I'll have the final optimization ready by Friday. Mike studied her reflection in the polished steel doors. That's the third major breakthrough you've delivered this month. The Department of Energy is ecstatic. I'm just doing what you hired me to do. Are you happy here, Sarah? The question caught her off guard. Happy isn't really the point. I'm productive, which is what matters. It matters to me. Sarah felt that familiar discomfort when Mike's professional demeanor slipped into something more personal. Why? Because talent like yours is rare. I don't want to lose it because my company can't provide a decent working environment. The elevator reached the lobby, but neither of them moved to exit. Your employees think I'm sleeping with you, Sarah said bluntly. Mike's jaw tightened. Who said that? Does it matter? It's what they're thinking. A janitor doesn't get promoted to consultant without some kind of favor being exchanged. I'll address it. No, you won't. That would only make it worse. Sarah stepped out of the elevator. I can handle office gossip, Mr. Sterling. I've dealt with worse. It's Mike. And what you shouldn't have to handle is harassment from my employees. Sarah turned to face him in the empty lobby. Then maybe you should ask yourself why you really hired me. Because if it was just about solving problems, you could have given me a consulting fee and sent me home. Instead, you gave me an office and a title and inserted me into a world where I clearly don't belong. Mike was quiet for a long moment. Maybe I wanted to see what you could accomplish with better resources. Or maybe you're trying to prove something. To your board, to yourself, I don't know. But I'm not your social experiment, Mike. She headed for the exit, but Mike followed her. Have dinner with me. Sarah stopped walking. Excuse me. Tomorrow night. There's something I want to discuss with you, and it's not appropriate for the office. What could you possibly want to discuss that requires dinner? Mike hesitated, and Sarah caught a glimpse of uncertainty in his expression. Your future with the company. There are opportunities coming up that might interest you. Sarah felt a warning bell going off in her head. What kind of opportunities? The kind that require trust. And trust requires getting to know each other better. I solve your problems, you pay me. That's all the trust we need. Is it? Mike stepped closer, and Sarah was suddenly aware of how empty the lobby was, how late the hour. Because I have a feeling there's a lot more to Sarah Johnson than meets the eye. The way he said it made her skin crawl with suspicion. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're remarkably talented for someone with no formal education. It means you understand complex systems with an intuition that usually takes years to develop. It means you're either a genius or you've had access to training that you're not talking about. Sarah felt her heart racing. You're investigating me. I'm trying to understand you. Those are the same thing. Sarah backed toward the exit. Stay out of my personal life, Mike. Our arrangement is professional. Keep it that way. She pushed through the glass doors into the Seattle night, leaving Mike standing alone in the lobby. The cool air helped clear her head, but it couldn't shake the feeling that she was being hunted by something she couldn't see. 3 blocks from the Sterling building, she pulled out her phone and called her sister. Sarah? It's almost 1 a.m. Is everything okay? Claire, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. You're scaring me. What's wrong? Have you noticed anyone asking questions about us? About our family, our background, anything unusual? What kind of questions? Sarah, you're not making sense. Sarah leaned against a bus stop, watching traffic flow past. My boss is digging into my past. I think he knows something about Dad. That's impossible. Dad disappeared when we were kids. There's nothing to know. There's always something to know, Claire. And guys like Mike Sterling don't hire janitors as consultants without a reason. Maybe the reason is that you're brilliant and he recognizes talent when he sees it. Sarah wished she could believe that. But the look in Mike's eyes when he'd asked about her father suggested something far more complicated was happening. Just be careful, okay? If anyone approaches you with questions about our family, don't answer. Call me immediately. Sarah, you're paranoid. Maybe this job is getting to you. Maybe it was. Or maybe her instincts were finally catching up to a truth she'd been avoiding. Either way, she had the distinct feeling that her carefully constructed life was about to fall apart. Mike's private investigator delivered the file at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, sliding the manila envelope across his desk like it contained state secrets. In many ways, it did. Everything you asked for is in there, Detective Ray Morrison said, accepting his payment. Birth certificates, school records, employment history. Took some digging, but I found what you were looking for. Mike waited until Morrison left before opening the envelope. The first document was a birth certificate dated 28 years ago. Sarah Michelle Johnson, daughter of Dr. Nathan David Johnson and Rebecca Ann Johnson. The father's occupation was listed as research scientist. The second document hit harder. Nathan Johnson's employee file from Sterling Technologies, complete with a photograph that made Mike's chest tighten. The man in the picture had Sarah's eyes, the same intelligent intensity that had first caught Mike's attention. Nathan had been his father's business partner for 3 years before vanishing without explanation. Mike pulled out his phone and called his father in Florida. Michael, this is early, even for you. Dad, I need to ask you about Nathan Johnson. The silence on the other end stretched long enough to confirm Mike's suspicions. Why are you asking about Nathan? Because his daughter is working for me, and I think there's more to his disappearance than you told me. Another pause. Nathan was brilliant, son. Too brilliant for his own good. He started asking questions about some of our government contracts. Wanted to know who we were really working for. And some questions are dangerous to ask. Nathan discovered that certain people in the company were selling technology to buyers we shouldn't have been dealing with. When he threatened to go public, he disappeared. Mike felt pieces clicking into place. Who was selling the technology? Your Uncle Robert was involved. Maybe others. I never got the full picture because Nathan took his evidence with him when he left. He didn't leave, Dad. He was murdered. You don't know that. I know his daughter spent 10 years thinking her father abandoned them. I know she's been struggling to survive while sitting on intellectual property that could make her rich. And I know she has no idea what really happened. Mike ended the call and stared at the documents spread across his desk. Sarah Johnson wasn't just a brilliant problem solver who'd wandered into his life by accident. She was the daughter of a man who died protecting the company's integrity, and she was working for the same people who might have killed her father. The office door opened without a knock, which meant only one person had arrived. Hello, Michael. Victoria Adams stood in his doorway wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her smile was perfectly practiced, and her presence made Mike's jaw clench with annoyance. Victoria, I thought you were in London. I was, but I heard some interesting rumors about Sterling Technologies' new hiring practices. She moved into his office like she belonged there, perching on the edge of his desk. A janitor turned consultant? That's quite a leap in corporate strategy. What do you want? Can I visit my ex-fiancée without an ulterior motive? You've never done anything without an ulterior motive. Mike gathered the documents and locked them in his desk drawer. Besides, I thought you were busy running your own company into the ground. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Adams Tech is doing fine, thank you. Though I hear your little pet project is doing remarkably well. The energy distribution system that was supposed to be impossible to solve. How would you know about that? I have friends in the Department of Energy. They're very impressed with your recent breakthrough. Victoria leaned closer. Tell me, Michael, what's so special about this Sarah Johnson? What makes a billionaire CEO take such a personal interest in a cleaning lady? Mike felt warning bells going off. That's none of your business. Everything about you is my business. We had something special, Michael. We could have built an empire together. We had a business arrangement that you tried to turn into industrial espionage. There's a difference. Victoria's mask slipped completely. I made one mistake. One bad decision that I've regretted for 3 years. But you're willing to trust some nobody with access to your most sensitive projects? Sarah Johnson has integrity, something you demonstrated you lack. Sarah Johnson is hiding something. People don't go from mopping floors to solving impossible problems without a story. What's her story, Michael? Before Mike could answer, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Sterling? Ms. Johnson is here for your 10 o'clock meeting. Victoria's eyes lit up with interest. Perfect timing. I'd love to meet the famous problem solver. Mike pressed the intercom button. Send her in, Janet. Sarah entered the office carrying a laptop and a cup of coffee, stopping short when she saw Victoria. Mike watched as the two women assessed each other with the instinctual wariness of competing predators. Sarah, this is Victoria Adams, CEO of Adams Technologies. Victoria, Sarah Johnson, our special consultant. Victoria extended a perfectly manicured hand. So you're the miracle worker I've been hearing about. It's fascinating to meet someone who's made such an impression on Michael. Sarah shook the offered hand briefly. Ms. Adams, I've heard of your company. Nothing too terrible, I hope. Nothing memorable. Mike suppressed a smile at Sarah's perfectly delivered dismissal. Victoria's expression tightened. I understand you solved a problem that stumped dozens of experts. That's quite an achievement for someone with your background. What do you know about my background? Only what's common knowledge. Sometimes the most interesting stories come from the most unexpected places. Sarah set her laptop on Mike's desk without taking her eyes off Victoria. And sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who ask too many questions about other people's stories. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Victoria stood up, smoothing her dress. Well, this has been enlightening. Michael, we should have lunch soon. Catch up on old times. She paused at the door. Ms. Johnson, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. After Victoria left, Sarah turned to Mike with suspicion written across her face. Who was that really? My ex-fiancé, and someone you should stay away from. Why was she asking about my background? Mike hesitated. He could tell Sarah the truth about what he'd discovered, but that would open conversations he wasn't ready to have. Victoria asks questions about everyone. It's how she operates. Sarah didn't look convinced, but she opened her laptop. The energy system is ready for the next phase of testing. But I need to ask you something first. What? Why do I get the feeling that everyone in this building knows more about me than I know about myself? Before Mike could answer, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. I have to go. Sarah, what's wrong? It's my sister. Someone just sent her a photo of her walking to class with a message that said, "Your sister should be more careful about the problems she chooses to solve." Mike felt ice forming in his stomach. Where is Claire now? At the university. I need to get to her. I'm coming with you. No, this is my problem. Sarah, if someone is threatening your sister because of your work here, then it's my problem too. Sarah was already heading for the door. The only problem here is that I ever walked into your office in the first place. The threatening message about Claire had been the beginning of everything unraveling. Within hours, Mike had moved both sisters to a secure location while his security team investigated the source. Claire was safely tucked away in a downtown hotel with round-the-clock protection, but the Department of Energy deadline couldn't wait for threats to be resolved. We need to finish the optimization tonight, Mike said, pacing his Malibu beach house while Sarah worked at the dining table. The prototype demonstration is tomorrow morning, and if we miss this window, we lose the contract. Sarah didn't look up from her laptop. Then maybe you should have thought about that before involving me in whatever corporate drama you've been hiding. They'd been working for 6 hours straight, the tension between them thick as fog. The house was isolated, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, with no neighbors for miles. Mike had insisted it was the safest place to complete their work, but Sarah suspected he had other motives. I didn't hide anything from you, Mike said, though they both knew it was a lie. Right? You just happened to hire a janitor who solved your impossible problem. Pure coincidence. Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard, channeling her anger into code. The algorithm is running at optimal efficiency. We're done here. Sarah, we need to talk. No, we don't. We need to deliver your prototype and then go back to our respective corners of the world. Mike stopped pacing and sat across from her at the table. Someone threatened your sister because of the work you're doing. That makes it my responsibility. Your responsibility? Sarah finally looked up, her dark eyes flashing. The only thing you're responsible for is keeping me in the dark while you played whatever game you've been playing since the day we met. It's not a game. Then what is it? Because normal bosses don't move their employees' families to safe houses. Normal bosses don't ask about their employees' fathers. And normal bosses definitely don't look at their employees the way you look at me. The accusation hung between them like a live wire. Mike leaned back in his chair, studying her face. How do I look at you? Sarah's breath caught. Like you're trying to solve a puzzle. Like I'm some kind of mystery you need to crack. Maybe you are. I'm not your mystery to solve, Mike. I'm a person who solved your technical problem. That's all this needs to be. Mike reached across the table and touched her hand. Is that really all you want this to be? The contact sent electricity up Sarah's arm. She should have pulled away, should have maintained the professional distance that had been crumbling for weeks. Instead, she found herself staring at his fingers covering hers. What I want doesn't matter, she said quietly. It matters to me. Sarah looked up and saw something in Mike's expression that made her heart race. The careful control he always maintained was slipping, revealing something raw and hungry underneath. Sarah, her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a confession. Before she could think, before she could remember all the reasons this was a terrible idea, she was leaning toward him across the table. Mike stood and moved around to her side, pulling her up from her chair. When his hands touched her face, Sarah felt her last defenses crumble. This is a mistake, she whispered. Probably. I work for you. I know. People will talk. Let them. Mike's mouth found hers, and Sarah forgot every rational objection she'd been building for weeks. The kiss was desperate, hungry, like they were both drowning and had found their only source of air. Sarah's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, needing more contact, more connection. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Mike rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the night I found you in my office. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Mike, I know this complicates everything. I know you have every reason not to trust me, but I can't pretend anymore that this is just professional. Sarah felt herself melting under the intensity of his gaze. All the walls she'd built, all the careful distance she'd maintained, crumbled in the face of the want she saw in his eyes. Upstairs, she said. They barely made it to his bedroom before they were pulling at each other's clothes. Months of suppressed attraction exploding into desperate need. Mike's hands explored every inch of her skin like he was memorizing her, and Sarah arched into his touch, feeling more alive than she had in years. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, Sarah's head on Mike's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. The room was dark except for moonlight streaming through the windows, and for a moment, Sarah allowed herself to feel safe. "I need to tell you something," Mike said, his voice rumbling in his chest. Sarah tensed. "What? About your father?" The words hit her like ice water. Sarah sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "What about my father?" Mike sat up too, running a hand through his hair. "I know who he was, Sarah. I've known since the day I hired you." "You've known what?" "Nathan Johnson was my father's business partner. He worked for Sterling Technologies 12 years ago." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "You knew. This whole time, you knew who I was." "Sarah, let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months? That everything between us has been based on some sick obsession with my dead father?" Sarah scrambled out of bed, grabbing her clothes from the floor. "Is that why you hired me? Is that why you've been so interested in my mysterious background?" "It started that way," Mike admitted, and Sarah felt like he'd punched her in the stomach. "But it's not why I'm here with you now. How can I believe anything you say?" Sarah pulled on her shirt with shaking hands. "You've been manipulating me from the beginning, playing some twisted game while I thought this was real." "It is real. What just happened between us, what I feel for you, that's real. What you feel for me, or what you feel for Nathan Johnson's daughter." Mike stood up, reaching for her. "Sarah, please. Don't touch me." She backed toward the door. "I was right the first time. This was a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life." "Where are you going?" "Anywhere but here." "Sarah, it's not safe." Someone threatened Claire. "You can't just leave." Sarah paused at the bedroom door, her hand on the handle. "The only person who's hurt me tonight is you, Mike. At least I know where I stand with whoever sent that threat." She walked out, leaving Mike standing alone in the moonlight, and knew that nothing between them would ever be the same. 3 days after Malibu, Sarah was back in her glass office pretending that her world hadn't been turned upside down. The energy prototype had been delivered successfully to the Department of Energy, earning Sterling Technologies a $2 billion contract, but the victory felt hollow. Mike had tried calling her 17 times. She'd ignored every call. She was deep in debugging a new algorithm when her office door opened without warning. Edward Sterling, Mike's uncle and the company's chief financial officer, entered with 2 security guards and a woman from HR that Sarah didn't recognize. "Ms. Johnson, please step away from your computer," Edward said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Sarah's blood went cold. "What's going on?" "We have credible evidence that you've been stealing proprietary information from Sterling Technologies," the HR representative said, consulting her tablet. "You're being terminated effective immediately." "That's impossible." Sarah stood up slowly, her mind racing. "I haven't stolen anything. Your computer and all files will be confiscated pending investigation," Edward continued. "Security will escort you from the building. I want to speak to Mike." "Mr. Sterling is the one who ordered this investigation," Edward said with something that might have been satisfaction. "He's reviewing the evidence as we speak." Sarah felt the floor dropping out from under her. "What evidence?" The HR woman turned her tablet around, showing Sarah a series of emails that appeared to come from her corporate account. The messages detailed technical specifications being sent to Adams Technologies, complete with timestamp data and IP addresses that traced back to her workstation. "These are fake," Sarah said immediately. "I never sent these emails." "The digital forensics team disagrees," Edward replied. "Ms. Adams contacted us yesterday when she received suspicious communications from your email address containing our proprietary algorithms." Victoria Adams. Of course. Sarah should have seen this coming the moment the woman had walked into Mike's office asking pointed questions about her background. "This is a setup," Sarah said. "Victoria Adams is trying to frame me." Ms. Adams is a respected CEO who came forward as soon as she realized what was happening, the HR woman said. "She provided full cooperation with our investigation." One of the security guards stepped forward. "Ma'am, We need you to come with us. Sarah looked around her office, at the projects she'd been working on, at the view of Elliott Bay that had become familiar over the past months. Everything was being stripped away based on fabricated evidence, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I need to get my personal belongings. They'll be mailed to you after our security team reviews them, Edwards said. For now, you need to leave the premises immediately. The walk to the elevator felt like a perp walk. Sarah was aware of employees stopping to stare, of whispered conversations starting in her wake. By the time she reached the lobby, half the building would know that the janitor-turned-consultant had been fired for corporate espionage. As the elevator descended, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging into things that don't concern you, or your sister will pay the price. Her hands were shaking as she typed back. Who is this? Someone who's giving you good advice. Take it. The elevator doors opened to reveal Mike standing in the lobby, his expression cold and distant. Sarah's heart lurched at the sight of him, but the ice in his gray eyes killed any hope of explanation or reconciliation. I trusted you, he said quietly, his voice carrying enough to reach the security guards but not the gathering crowd of employees. Mike, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been selling our technology to my ex-fiancée. How you used what happened between us to gain access to classified information. Each word hit Sarah like a physical blow. You know that's not true. You know me. I thought I did. Mike's jaw was tight with controlled anger. I thought you were different. I thought you had integrity. I do have integrity. This is a setup, and if you weren't blinded by whatever history you have with Victoria Adams, you'd see that. The evidence is clear, Sarah. The emails came from your account. The technical specifications were accurate down to the last detail. Only someone with your level of access could have provided that information. Sarah felt tears threatening, but she refused to give the watching crowd the satisfaction of seeing her break down. So that's it. You're not even going to investigate further? You're just going to take fabricated evidence and destroy my career. I gave you opportunities that you never should have had, Mike said, his voice rising slightly. I trusted you with the most sensitive projects in this company, and you repaid that trust by betraying everything we've worked for. The injustice of it was breathtaking. Sarah had solved problems that saved the company millions, had delivered breakthroughs that positioned Sterling Technologies at the forefront of renewable energy technology, and now she was being discarded based on lies. You're making a mistake, she said. The mistake was mine, thinking that someone like you could be trusted in a position like this. The words someone like you hit hardest of all. Despite everything they'd shared, despite the connection she'd thought was real, Mike still saw her as the janitor who didn't belong in his world. You're right, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rage and heartbreak coursing through her. You did make a mistake, but it wasn't trusting me. It was thinking you were better than the people who've been trying to destroy me since the day I walked into your building. She turned toward the exit, but Mike's voice stopped her. Sarah. She looked back one last time, hoping to see some doubt in his expression, some sign that he questioned what was happening. Instead, she saw only the cold certainty of a man who'd made his decision. Don't contact me again. Don't contact anyone at this company. And stay away from anything connected to Sterling Technologies. Sarah walked through the glass doors into the Seattle afternoon, knowing that her life had just been systematically dismantled by people with more power and fewer scruples than she'd ever imagined. Behind her, the building that had briefly felt like home now looked like a fortress designed to keep people like her out. Her phone buzzed again. Smart choice. Now disappear. But Sarah Johnson had never been good at disappearing, especially when someone was trying to force her to. 6 weeks after being escorted from Sterling Technologies, Sarah stood in the kitchen of their studio apartment, staring at the eviction notice taped to the refrigerator. The red lettering seemed to mock her. Final notice. Vacate premises within 72 hours. How bad is it? Claire asked from the couch, where she was surrounded by medical textbooks she could no longer afford to keep. We have 3 days. Sarah crumpled the notice and threw it in the trash, which was already overflowing because they couldn't afford the garbage service anymore. I've got enough saved for maybe 2 weeks in a motel, but after that, Claire closed her biochemistry textbook with a soft thud. I can drop out of med school, get a job, help us get back on our feet. Absolutely not. Sarah, be realistic. My scholarship only covers tuition, not living expenses. And with your reputation destroyed, no tech company in Seattle will hire you. Maybe if we both work, you're not dropping out. Sarah's voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. Dad died so that people like us could have better opportunities. I'm not letting his sacrifice be for nothing. Dad died 12 years ago. We don't even know why he really left. Sarah turned away from her sister, unable to meet her eyes. There was so much Claire didn't know, so much Sarah had been protecting her from. The truth about their father, about Sterling Technologies, about why someone had threatened Claire's safety. It was all connected to a web of corporate corruption that Sarah was only beginning to understand. Her phone rang, displaying a number she'd been avoiding for weeks. Mike Sterling had called her 43 times since her termination. She'd answered exactly 0 of them. "Aren't you going to get that?" Claire asked. "No point." He made his position clear. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. This time, the number was different, one she didn't recognize. "Hello, Ms. Johnson? This is Margaret Chin from First National Bank. I'm calling about an account that was recently activated under your Social Security number." Sarah frowned. "I don't have any accounts with First National. According to our records, Dr. Nathan Johnson established a trust account in 2013 with specific instructions that it could only be accessed by his daughters after a 12-year waiting period. The account became active last month." Sarah's legs went weak. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "What kind of account? I'm not authorized to discuss details over the phone, but I can tell you that you'll need to come in person with proper identification to access the contents. The account includes both monetary deposits and a safety deposit box." After hanging up, Sarah stared at the phone in her hand, trying to process what she'd just heard. Her father had left them something. Something he'd planned for them to find 12 years after his disappearance. "Who was that?" Claire asked. "Wrong number," Sarah lied. She wasn't ready to explain to Claire that their father might have anticipated his own death. Across the city, Mike Sterling was discovering his own devastating truths. The email forensics report spread across his desk painted a picture that made his stomach turn with self-loathing. The IP addresses were spoofed, his head of security, David Park, explained. Someone with advanced technical knowledge created fake email headers that made it appear the messages originated from Ms. Johnson's workstation. But the actual source was a compromised server in the Sterling Technologies network. How compromised? Someone's been in our system for at least 18 months, possibly longer. They had access to employee accounts, financial records, technical specifications. This wasn't a random hack. It was systematic corporate espionage. Mike felt sick. Who had that level of access? Executive-level employees, board members, people with administrative privileges. David pulled up another screen. "There's more. We found evidence of encrypted communications between accounts belonging to Edward Sterling and Victoria Adams dating back 3 years." The betrayal hit Mike like a physical blow. His own uncle had been selling company secrets while positioning himself as the voice of corporate responsibility. And Mike had played right into their hands by publicly destroying Sarah's reputation. "Edward's been feeding information to Victoria Adams since before our engagement," Mike said, the pieces finally clicking together. "They used me. It looks like they were planning something bigger. The Sarah Johnson setup was probably meant to discredit her before she could discover something that threatened them." Mike's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Heard about your little scandal. Coffee tomorrow? I hate to see you suffering alone." The audacity of it was breathtaking. Victoria was already positioning herself as his comforter in the wake of Sarah's betrayal. "David, I need you to find Sarah Johnson. I need to make this right." "Sir, our sources indicate she's been evicted from her apartment. She and her sister have been staying in motels around the city, but they're running out of money fast." Mike closed his eyes, imagining Sarah and Claire struggling to survive while he'd been wallowing in self-righteous anger. "Find them, and get our legal team started on reversing every action we took against Sarah. I want her cleared of all charges and her reputation restored." "What about your uncle? Edward Sterling is no longer employed by this company, and I want a full investigation into his activities over the past 5 years." Meanwhile, Sarah stood in the lobby of First National Bank, holding a key that had been in the safety deposit box her father had left for her. The box had contained documents that painted a picture of corporate corruption reaching back 20 years, encrypted files on a flash drive, and instructions written in her father's careful handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're old enough to understand the truth, the letter began. Sterling Technologies has been infiltrated by people who care more about profit than ethics. I discovered they were selling military technology to hostile nations through shell companies. When I threatened to expose them, they eliminated me. The evidence is on the flash drive, encrypted with your birth date and Claire's. Use it wisely, and trust no one in the Sterling family except Michael. He's the only one who doesn't know what his relatives have done. Sarah's hands shook as she read the final paragraph. There are people who will try to silence you as they silenced me. Protect Claire. Protect yourself. And remember that sometimes the only way to get justice is to take it yourself. The flash drive contained financial records showing payments from Sterling Technologies to foreign shell companies, communication logs between Edward Sterling Sr. and arms dealers, and audio recordings of conversations that implicated half the company's board of directors in treason. Her father hadn't just been murdered. He'd been murdered for trying to stop his own business partners from selling weapons technology to enemies of the United States. Sarah walked out of the bank with enough evidence to destroy Sterling Technologies and enough money from her father's trust to disappear forever. But as she thought about Mike's words in the lobby, someone like you, she realized she wasn't interested in disappearing. She was interested in justice. Her phone rang again. This time, she answered. Sarah, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Mike's voice sounded strained, desperate in a way she'd never heard before. I have nothing to say to you, she said. I know about the setup. I know Edward and Victoria framed you. I know I was an idiot who destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too proud to see the truth. Sarah felt a flicker of the old pain, but it was overwhelmed by a cold anger that had been building for weeks. You're right, she said. You were an idiot. But it's too late for apologies, Mike. You made your choice when you decided that your corporate reputation was more important than trusting the woman you claimed to care about. Sarah, please, let me make this right. Some things can't be made right. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. She ended the call and turned off her phone. There would be time to deal with Mike Sterling later, after she'd dealt with the people who destroyed her family, after she'd made them pay for what they'd done to her father. Mike Sterling called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. But what the 12 directors found when they entered the Sterling Technologies conference room wasn't the quarterly review they'd expected. FBI agents stood at every exit, and Special Agent Catherine Rodriguez sat at the head of the table with a stack of federal warrants. Ladies and gentlemen, Agent Rodriguez announced, this meeting is now a federal investigation into charges of corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit treason, and accessory to murder. Edward Sterling's face went white. This is outrageous. Michael, what is the meaning of this? Mike stood at the far end of the room, his expression harder than anyone had ever seen it. The meaning, Uncle Edward, is that your 30-year career of selling American military technology to hostile nations is over. You have no proof of any such thing. Actually, I do. Mike activated the wall screen, displaying bank records that showed millions of dollars flowing from Sterling Technologies to shell companies in countries under U.S. sanctions. Thanks to Dr. Nathan Johnson, who documented everything before you had him killed. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Edward stood up abruptly. Nathan Johnson disappeared. No one killed him. Dr. Johnson was murdered because he discovered that you and your father were using Sterling Technologies as a front for arms dealing, Agent Rodriguez said. We have audio recordings of conversations between Edward Sterling Sr. and buyers representing Iranian and North Korean interests. Mike clicked to the next slide, showing transcripts of phone calls that made several board members pale. Nathan Johnson spent months collecting evidence before he tried to expose you. When he threatened to go public, you eliminated him and buried the evidence. This is all fabricated, Edward said, but his voice lacked conviction. Tell that to the grand jury, Agent Rodriguez replied, nodding to the agents by the door. Edward Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit treason, violation of the Arms Export Control Act, and accessory to murder. As Edward was led away in handcuffs, Mike turned to address the remaining board members. Effective immediately, I'm restructuring this company from the ground up. Anyone who was aware of these activities and failed to report them will be terminated and face potential criminal charges. Sterling Technologies will cooperate fully with federal investigators to ensure that every person responsible for these crimes faces justice. The meeting dissolved into chaos, but Mike had already moved on to his next objective. Victoria Adams was holding a press conference at the Grand Hyatt downtown, presumably to capitalize on Sterling Technologies' apparent implosion. Mike arrived just as she was taking questions from reporters. "Ms. Adams," a journalist called out, "what's your response to rumors that Adams Technologies has been receiving stolen intellectual property from Sterling?" Victoria's practiced smile faltered slightly. "Those are completely baseless accusations. Adams Technologies has always operated with the highest ethical standards." Mike walked into the back of the room, and Victoria's eyes locked on his. The color drained from her face as he approached the podium. "Actually," Mike said, taking the microphone, "I have evidence that Adams Technologies has been receiving stolen Sterling intellectual property for 3 years, facilitated by Edward Sterling in exchange for personal payments totaling over $2 million. "You can't prove that," Victoria said, but her voice was shaking. Mike pulled out his phone and activated the speaker. The room filled with the sound of a recorded phone conversation between Victoria and Edward, discussing the theft of the energy distribution algorithm and the plan to frame Sarah Johnson. "This recording was made 6 weeks ago," Mike announced to the stunned reporters. "Victoria Adams conspired with Edward Sterling to steal proprietary technology and destroy the reputation of an innocent woman to cover their tracks." Victoria tried to grab the microphone, but FBI agents were already moving through the crowd toward her. "Michael, you don't understand. We can work together. We can build something bigger than either of our companies alone." "We could have built something," Mike replied. "But you chose greed over integrity. You chose betrayal over partnership. And you helped destroy a good person to protect your crimes." "She's nobody," Victoria screamed as the agents reached her. "She's a janitor. She doesn't deserve what you've given her." "She deserves better than this company ever gave her," Mike said. "And she deserves better than me." After Victoria was arrested, Mike stood alone in the hotel lobby, staring at his phone. He'd tried calling Sarah 17 times in the past week. She hadn't answered once. But he had one more call to make. "Dad, it's Mike. I need you to transfer 51% of your Sterling Technologies shares to me immediately." "Michael, what's happening?" "The news is saying Edward was arrested. Edward was selling weapons technology to enemies of the United States. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. And I'm about to do something that's going to shock everyone, including you." "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to give half of everything I own to the woman I love." The storm hit Seattle that evening with a fury that matched Mike's desperation. He found Sarah at the University of Washington Library, sitting alone at a table covered with legal documents and her father's evidence files. She looked up when he approached, her expression carefully neutral. "The library closes in 10 minutes, she said without preamble. "I'm not here about the library." Mike sat down across from her, water dripping from his coat. "I'm here to tell you what I did today. I saw the news. Congratulations on finally discovering what kind of family you've been working with for 30 years. Sarah, I spent the day destroying my own company to get justice for your father. I arrested my uncle, exposed my ex-fiancée, and cooperated with federal investigators to ensure that everyone who hurt your family faces consequences." Sarah looked up from her papers. "And you want credit for doing what you should have done years ago?" "I want forgiveness for being too blind and too proud to trust the woman who solved problems I couldn't solve, who saw through lies I couldn't see through, and who loved me despite having every reason not to." "Loved," Sarah corrected. Past tense. Mike pulled out a legal document and placed it on the table. "I'm transferring half of my personal assets to you, not as payment, not as compensation, but because I want you to have the resources to build whatever life you choose, whether that includes me or not." Sarah glanced at the document, her expression unchanged. "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" "I want my father back. I want the 12 years my sister and I spent thinking he abandoned us. I want the scholarship Claire had to give up because she couldn't afford living expenses after I was fired. I want the reputation you destroyed when you chose to believe lies over trusting your own heart." Mike felt each word like a physical blow. "I can't give you those things, but I can give you everything else." "I don't want everything else." Mike leaned forward, his voice breaking slightly. "Then tell me what I can do. Tell me how to make this right." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, rain hammering against the library windows. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You can't make it right, Mike. Some things can't be fixed with money or grand gestures or public apologies. Some damage is permanent. So that's it. We're done? Sarah looked at him directly for the first time since he'd sat down. What we had was built on lies. You hired me because of who my father was, not because of who I am. You investigated my background while pretending to trust me. And when it mattered most, you chose to believe the worst about me rather than fight for what we had. I was wrong about all of that. But what I felt for you, what happened between us in Malibu, that wasn't based on lies. That was real. Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you fell in love with the idea of Nathan Johnson's daughter, not with Sarah Johnson the person. Mike stood up, pacing to the window where rain streaked down the glass. You're wrong. I fell in love with the woman who fixed an impossible problem in 60 seconds. I fell in love with the woman who demanded fair treatment even when she had no leverage. I fell in love with the woman who protected her sister and maintained her dignity even when my entire company was trying to tear her down. He turned back to face her. I fell in love with your intelligence, your integrity, your strength, and your stubborn refusal to be intimidated by people who thought they were better than you. I fell in love with Sarah Johnson, not Nathan Johnson's daughter. Sarah wiped her eyes, though Mike couldn't tell if it was tears or rain from the storm outside. You say that now. I've been saying it for weeks. You just weren't ready to hear it. Sarah stood up and gathered her papers. The library's closing. As they walked toward the exit, Mike made one last desperate attempt. Marry me. Sarah stopped walking. What? Not because you're Nathan Johnson's daughter. Not because you solved my technical problems. Not because I feel guilty about what happened. Mike took her hands, forcing her to look at him. Marry me because I can't imagine building anything worthwhile without you. Marry me because you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves your trust. Marry me because I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. The rain was pouring down as they stood in the library entrance, and Sarah could see the sincerity in Mike's eyes, the desperation of a man who'd lost everything that mattered and was fighting for one last chance at redemption. I need time, she said finally. How much time? Enough to know that you're choosing me, not trying to fix your mistakes. Mike nodded, though it clearly cost him. I'll wait as long as you need. 6 months later, Sarah Johnson walked down the aisle of a small church in Seattle, wearing her mother's wedding dress and carrying wildflowers that Claire had picked from their new garden. Mike stood at the altar in a simple black suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached. We are gathered here today, the minister began, to witness the union of two people who have learned that love isn't about perfection, but about choosing each other despite imperfections. In the front row, Claire dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, wearing her new graduation gown. She'd finished medical school with honors and would be starting her residency at the free clinic that Sterling Technologies now funded as part of its community outreach program. Do you, Michael Sterling, take Sarah Johnson to be your partner in all things, to trust her judgment, to support her dreams, and to love her with honesty and integrity for all the days of your life? I do, Mike said, his voice carrying to every corner of the small church. Do you, Sarah Johnson, take Michael Sterling to be your partner in all things, to challenge him when he's wrong, to support him when he's right, and to love him with the courage that brought you together? Sarah looked into Mike's eyes and saw not the billionaire CEO who'd hired her, but the man who'd spent 6 months proving that he could choose love over pride, justice over convenience, and her happiness over his own comfort. I do. 2 years later, Sarah Sterling stood in the same conference room where she'd once been accused of corporate espionage, addressing the Sterling Technologies board of directors as the company's co-chief executive officer. The energy distribution system she'd optimized was now being implemented in 12 countries, and Sterling Technologies had become a leader in ethical business practices. Our quarterly results show record profits and the highest employee satisfaction ratings in the industry, Sarah reported to the board. Our commitment to transparency and ethical conduct has attracted the best talent and the most innovative partnerships in the clean energy sector. After the meeting, Mike found her in their shared office, looking out at Elliott Bay where cargo ships carried clean energy technology to ports around the world. Any regrets? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Sarah leaned back against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. About which part? Marrying a stubborn billionaire who took 6 months to realize he was in love with me? Or about taking a job that started with me cleaning floors and ended with me running the company? About trusting me when I didn't deserve it? Sarah turned in his arms. You earned it back. Every single day, you earned it back. Outside their window, Seattle sparkled in the afternoon sun, and Sarah thought about her father's letter, about justice and trust, and the courage to take what you deserve rather than accept what you're given. She'd gotten her justice. She'd gotten her love. And she'd gotten the life that Nathan Johnson had died trying to secure for his daughters. Some bridges could be rebuilt after all.